Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan, and today I am pleased to welcome Ebenezar to the podcast. He's joining us from Nigeria. Ebenezar is the founder of Policy Shapers, a civic startup that empowers young people with knowledge, skills, and tools to engage with public policy. He is the convener of Rivers 2050 Vision, a 25-year futures initiative shaping citizen-led democracy, climate resilience, and institutional reform in Africa. He has a long resume. He's an alumnus of the London School of Journalism, Harvard Kennedy School, Stanford Center for Professional Development, and he has been recognized globally for his leadership in foresight and governance innovation. Ebenezar, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Ted. Really, really happy to be here.
Well, very nice to meet you. Thanks for taking the time to do so. And where are you right now? Are you in Port Harcourt?
Yes. I'm currently in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And for the listeners who don't know, so Port Harcourt is way down in the south, just next to the Atlantic Ocean. It's a small, it's sort of like calmish city. Think of it more like it feels quite like Florida, right? Quite serene, quite a number of beaches. Feels quite hot, but also can feel cold sometimes because of the proximity to the to the ocean. But yeah, it's a really really nice place, and my family and I are based here. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And tell us a little bit about Rivers State. I had to do a little bit of research on Rivers State. I understand that you are a state within Nigeria. Is that right?
Yes. So Nigeria has 36 states, and Rivers State is one of the 36 states. It has the third largest city when you look at population wise. The state itself has about 9 million people, roughly. Like I said, located down south. What's quite unique about it is that it's at the heart of Nigeria's sort of like oil and gas industry. Um, it's existed for 58 plus years now. Has a lot of potential, but has really struggled a lot with like government and governance, which is like the story of most parts of the world, right? Um, has a huge youth population, has like amazing arable land, like I said, a lot of beaches and just like natural, attractions, but very like low tourism, low potential for like industry, very few jobs for many young people. So you have a lot of young people, for example, migrating from River State to Lagos State or Abuja to sort of like find jobs. That's the story of the state. But like we have quite a lot of like nice cuisine as well. So like very tasty meals that we're quite popular for, and we also brag about it a lot as well because like people from River State, they're often called Port Harcourt boys or Port Harcourt girls. And so wherever they go in the world, they sort of like flaunt that image as their sort of like their badge of honor, sort of to say they're from this particular place. Yeah.
So how did you develop your passion for sustainability planning? You just saw it sounds like you saw the potential, or you see the potential for Rivers State. But how did this come about?
Yeah, so I actually started my career out as a journalist. As far back as 2010, I started out writing online. And this was even before I went to journalism school. So I eventually went to London School of Journalism. But before this time, I had always been fascinated by just information, right? As a kid, I grew up with a lot of books. My dad always had like old books and magazines lying around the house. I'm sure growing up, I always tell my mom, I'm that kind of kid who basically just like wrote on the fridge and wrote on the wall. You know, those annoying kids. I mean, I have a 1-year-old now who's doing that. Yeah, he really annoys me.
Getting you back.
Yeah, exactly. It's paying me back. So I feel like I was that kind of kid. And I was also quite curious. So I eventually grew up to became a journalist, worked for a couple of local news platforms, wrote on a couple of American-based platforms like Huffington Post as well, for a couple of years. And I think just working as a journalist exposed me to just like information about the world. It expanded my worldview a lot. And I think just narrowing down to development journalism, where I would get to like interview people who are within the UN circles, speak to like leaders, thought leaders. I had this thing. It wasn't a cool podcast like your podcast, Ted, but it was a sort of like a SoundCloud-ish kind of podcast at the time. This was in 2013. And I would speak to like several leaders, folks from the UN and stuff. And I think that got me quite interested in the fact that for everyone I spoke to, they understood what the problem was, but there was just very little action being taken. Like people knew they had the facts, the data, There was this understanding, but very little action. And I also felt like something needs to be done. Like we seem to speak a lot at some of these global convenings. I've attended like the World Economic Forum and some of the COP side events and stuff. And I felt like, can we do something beyond just talking, right? And I feel like that was the sort of like the heart of what sort of like moved me to move into the civil society space and begin to work more within the development space. And so seeing that potential, just like I said, in River State, but also my career taking me to those spaces where I felt like we could do a lot. I mean, like we understand the problem. Can we just go solve it, right? And I feel just trying to take those little steps to make it work. But also understanding as well that so we speak about development sometimes in the global context, right? Like the SDGs, right? And these sort of like big goals.
Yeah.
But action for most of these things would start locally, right? And so for us to make any kind of progress, we would need to make the states and the local. So for the Nigerian context, we have states and we have local governments. So each state also has like sub government. So we have to make these smaller units to work for us to have a much larger, success story, right? It's not enough to have big goals at the national and global level without local action. So that's, for the past decade has sort of like been the mantra for my life. How do we make things to work at the local level? How do we ensure that young people understand the sort of like the policy process, understand how they can influence change, and work with me to sort of like make it work. I've had the opportunity of working across several organizations now, more than 40 of them. Folks like Chain.org and stuff, where we built citizens movements, collected petition signatures, held leaders accountable across several local governments and states across Nigeria. And so, that's sort of like being the driver.
Well, you are clearly the right guy. I read as I was doing a little bit of research for the podcast that about 50 years ago there was a River State Development Plan that was looking at a 5-year time horizon, 1975 to 1980. And then you said that really nothing has happened in 50 years. People stopped thinking and dreaming. Why was that, Ebenezar?
And I feel that this is a parallel you find mostly around most parts of the developing world, is that so Nigeria got independence like 60 something years ago, 65 years ago. Most of the countries that got independence at the start, when you had leaders who were mostly young people, like our governor at the time, 50 years ago, was in his 20s. And you find that these people had like quite a lot of vision and really wanted to prove themselves, to say like, we need independence. And now we're independent. How can we show that we can really do something great, right? I feel like leadership over time, so like just went downhill, right? The desire to want to prove themselves, the sort of like the vision and the drive to want to make things work, so like went off. And so that's why for River State, after the first plan in 1975, things just went off. The states there to move in very short cycles, because just like the US, our own political cycle is every 4 years. And so we go to the polls every 4 years. So we're actually going to the polls in 2027. So the typical politician would promise something he'll do for 4 years. He's not thinking about the next 5 or the next 7 years. He's thinking about
50.
just
right.
50. Really, for him, it's just 4 years. So that cycle also has now led to like short-term thinking. What can we get quickly? Again, the things that we've seen that have come in with the so like the oil sort of thinking, which is like take it out of the ground, sell it. Don't care if it destroys rivers, don't care if it destroys anything else. What can we get now? How can we sell it now and get the money now? So that short-term thinking sort of like has destroyed quite a bit of things that have happened. So I feel, I wasn't born then. I was born just 3 years ago, but I feel just speaking to those leaders and just seeing that change in thinking, I think got me quite worried. And again, like I said, seeing the potential that the state has. Last year, I was like, yeah, we have to do something about this. For a couple of years, I advocated for governors to do something, guys. Let's come up with a plan. Can we think beyond just the next election and just plan? And nobody really took me seriously. And I felt traditionally government often leads these planning processes, especially in Nigeria and Africa. It will be the government that will say, okay, we need a 20-year plan. And then the government, for example, gets a consultant or someone in the development space to design a plan, and then they announce the plan to the citizens. But in this case, since nobody was taking it seriously and we didn't have a government or a consultant who would come do it,
so you formed policy shapers, right?
Yes. So policy shapers was then born. Yeah. They're like, let's try it. Let's do something. I have quite a bit of experience from working in the policy space. Also have connections with people from my days doing the interview podcast in 2013, speaking to several leaders and attending these various forums. I'm like, let's find the people who can speak to us and teach us, right? And let's see if there's a way we can cause some bit of change around here. And so that's how the trajectory eventually became what we have now. Yeah.
And then the mission for policy shapers it's quite broad, but I think the initial tactic was to create the river's 2050 vision. And am I right that the way you started out was putting together a survey and asking a broad swath of the population what is their vision for the future? Was that right? It was a questionnaire.
Yes. So that was on. So actually, the first step was getting other young people who cared similarly about the future, and were worried about sort of like the state's dependence on oil, lack of diversification of the economy, the fact that there were no jobs, the fact that there was short-term thinking. So just getting young people to form something that we call the task force, right? And we're like, let's get ourselves together first. And when we organized ourselves, we're like, okay, so what can we do to document the wishes, the dreams, the aspirations of people about the next 25 years? And who do we need to get into this conversation? So we need to get experts. We need everyday citizens, especially those who are marginalized. So like women, young people, people with disabilities, especially because even the way our built environment is in Nigeria for most of our states, it's just staircases everywhere, hardly any elevators, hardly any ramps for people with wheelchairs and stuff. So we had to look for like how we're able to get everyone who traditionally wouldn't be brought into that kind of conversation into the room.
How did you do that? How did you convene all these people?
So we've used the most basic tools. We've had physical engagement, but for most part of the project, we've used the most basic tools: WhatsApp groups, Zoom meetings, social media conversations like Twitter Spaces and stuff like that. But it's mostly just being like the things that everybody uses every day, right? We found that as opposed to going to build a special tool or platform, why not go where people already are and just like leverage that space as a way to reach people? So that's how we've convened it. If you check our YouTube channel at Policy Shapers, you find the record of the conversations that we've had. We also then started to move beyond just the visioning exercise. We then started to do things that we call policy hackathons, where we'd say for this weekend, everyone just like, let's shut down this weekend. What are the top 3 problems currently in the States? How do we solve them? And we form groups, and we just like, how people do tech hackathons? So we just like shut down and just start brainstorming, finding case studies from around the world, and then writing policy briefs that would help sort of like address these particular issues. And we actually would take those policy briefs to the government. For a very long time, they didn't take us seriously. Now we're beginning to see a slower change where they're like, okay, because we've done this now for like 3 editions of the policy hackathon, they're slowly beginning to take us seriously, taking a few ideas here and there. But I feel like just building that movement of citizens who are really interested in changing stuff has given us the kind of power, basically, that we need for things like universal vision.
How congratulations. How fantastic. How many people do you think that you've had involved in Policy Shapers? I mean, is it hundreds?
So at least so the one of our first campaigns mobilized over 80,000 people, and this was a cross-continent campaign.
Yeah.
For the Rivers 2050 vision, the task force itself has close to 200 young people who are leading conversations. But
Yeah.
obviously, we've engaged experts across 15 thematic areas. So if I was to put everything together as a sum total, I would say over 100,000 clearly of
Fantastic.
people within Nigeria, but now also across Africa, whom we're engaging on these various policy issues, getting young people excited about public policy and how they don't need to be policy analysts or experts, but how they can care more about the news and then begin to ask the questions needed to help them for their future.
And I wanted when you gave your TEDx talk, you presented 5. I think you called them predictions. Sort of 5 major factors that are really important when you're doing this long range sustainability planning in Nigeria, and they're probably absolutely relevant, like you said, all the way across Africa and perhaps throughout the developing world. I want to talk about. I mean, the one of the first ones is renewable. The first one was renewable energy, and you've already said a few times that there's been a lot of oil and gas development in River State. I presume that the profits are going out of the state, out of the country. Talk a little bit about the potential for renewable energy in your view.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I have light on now is because I have solar panels on my roof, and that's what's powering my energy at the moment, right? I feel like Nigeria's energy challenge has gone on persistently for almost for as long as our country has existed, and I feel different states have felt it differently. But like generally, because the system is built in a way that we have a national grid that all states then connect to, and we have 36 states. So really, like, what kind of grid would you build for all of the states in Nigeria, for all of the homes to be able to be connected? I mean, you need to think beyond just like one dam or one reactor plant somewhere. Like, you need to think from a more like systems approach where you're thinking beyond just a bigger need, right? So we've struggled with this for a very long time as a country and as a state. And in 2022, the Nigerian government signed something called the Electricity Act that for the first time now gives states the power to generate their own electricity, right? Saying that, so instead of having this whole big national grid that we all connect to, how do states now look at what resources that they have? So for example, for us, I mentioned that we're just next to the Atlantic Ocean. So wind energy, for example, is one of the things that we should be thinking about, right? We can, I mean, our name is River State, so there's a lot of rivers all around us. So obviously there's potential for like dams and stuff like that. Hydro, There's also potential for solar as well, which is a recurring theme across the continent, but also across the country, right? So these are sort of things that the government can invest in when we start thinking about what state-led, local government-led power sources could be, whether we're thinking from a grid level, but also from an off-grid level. What are some of the applications that we can bring in to solve this challenge? So there's a huge potential there, but I think the problem has been that the central thinking has always been, let's create it somewhere and then just like wire it down to the various states, without having to think beyond just that central thinking lens. Yeah.
And what percentage of the population has electricity right now?
Actually, we're currently at the center of a huge power crisis. So I would say somewhere between 12 and 18% ish, because most of the country now is actually facing a very huge blackout. On a regular day or in a regular period, maybe somewhere between 20 and 40%. But currently is really, really bad. The dams are having issues. Most of the gas turbines are struggling because now with the issues in the Middle East, accessibility to gas and everything has reduced. So we're quite in the heat of the moment. So within 12-ish.
And what are the impacts of that relatively low electrification rate?
Yeah, I mean,
there's widespread impacts, I know.
From as big as hospitals not being able to power things like ICUs. We've had cases where hospitals are now having to like fall back to like using like generators. That's like their own small power power tools, and not being able to put their their generators on throughout, or even cases where you have hotels not able to power all through the day. And they're like, okay, they have times when they put on their own generating power sets and stuff like that. So that affects things like tourism, healthcare. I mean, I can't even talk about education because most of our schools are even struggling and are not even being connected as well. So so I mean, broad impact for a young person like me. So you have many young people like me who might be working remotely, who have like digital skills. Maybe they are working in software development and stuff. They can't work, it becomes a huge impediment. They have to generate their own power, get their own internet, so all of those kind of things I think are huge impacts.
So how did you get solar panels on your roof? What was the process of doing that?
I saved money for quite a number of years. This is an issue that had trailed me for so many years. So I'd been saving personally. My wife and I, we saved money for quite a number of years. And I think it was 2 years ago that we were eventually able to get a small set with some inverter batteries and stuff to like power, things like lights, power the internet, just so that we have fans and stuff.
But you had to personally take the impetus to raise the capital. There was no financing. There was no other way of doing it.
Yes. There was no financing. Nigeria has something called the Rural Electrification Agency, which is like a subset under the Ministry of Power. They have tried to do quite a bit of work, but because of just how large scale the problem is, I don't think it will be solved alone by just like giving grants here and there. It's like, hey, you take some money and fix this. We need to think much more larger than that, right?
Broadly.
How how do we, for example, how do we ensure that panels are more affordable? Because the government currently taxes things like panels and batteries and stuff. So you have to you pay for them, but then there's a tax on them, right? Yeah. So how do we solve this kind of like structural issues beyond just like a grants giving mechanism?
Let's move forward to the next prediction, the next major factor that you laid out in your talk, which was global climate change. And is there an awareness? Is there an awareness amongst the youth in Nigeria of the ramifications of global climate change?
Yeah, I think it's over the past couple of years, it's grown a lot more, especially because we've now started to see the real life impacts. It's beyond just like what some scientists talks about on YouTube now, right? It's like you see the flooding, right? You see the extended heat waves that we've had. So I think it's grown. Also, it's grown as well with the increased internet penetration across the country. Because despite the energy challenges that we're having, access to like mobile phones have really grown. So most people now have phones, so they can be a lot more enlightened about this kind of issues. Civil society has done quite like remarkable work as well in going to like remote communities to speak about climate change and energy and environmental conservation and sanitation and stuff like that. So that's also helped as well in getting.
Is there a resistance? I mean, it sounds like a lot of jobs that you have in Rivers State are related to the hydrocarbon industry, oil and gas. Is there? I mean, basically, that's going to have to change, right?
Yes.
There's going to have to be a major transition away from hydrocarbons to a carbon-free society. And that are you finding resistance to what you're saying?
There is resistance at the government level, actually, because I think the government is too lazy to think beyond just like a hydrocarbon economy, where it's just like, like I said earlier, drill it from the ground, sell it, and give us the money. They need to be thinking beyond that, to thinking about things like agriculture and what are the other like renewables and what are the kind of things that we can do, like comparative advantage that we have across the continent, and how can we use that to build our economy. So you find more resistance from the government level. I feel like the people would sort of, if they see the benefits to themselves, and especially like I said now, because we're seeing the impacts. I'm from a community in River State called the Ogoni community, OGONI. It's a popular community because one of our leaders, Ken Saro-Wiwa, was a global environmental activist. He spoke about climate change so many years ago before it became a big thing. And we have seen firsthand oil pollution in our rivers. I mean, we can't fish anymore. We can, so like you don't need to explain to them, like we understand it really well, right? But you have the government still pushing for hydrocarbon exploration because for them, like I said, they're really lazy and they prefer that's an easier way to get off things and the economy. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Now your population is expected to grow from, you're right, about 9 million today to
yeah,
growing by about 400,000 per year, adding another
yeah,
4 million people in
yeah,
your time in the next 10 years. How
yeah,
does that affect? I mean, does that just exacerbate all of the challenges that you're facing?
It does. It does. I mean, whether it's housing, I think housing has become a big challenge now within River State, but also across the country in Nigeria as well. So it
Yeah.
does. Makes everything harder, right?
Yeah.
So that's why. I mean, I'm religious, but I think the kind of teachings that we have sometimes in our religious circles that says, just have so many kids are great, and stuff like that. The lack
Sure.
of education on family planning and stuff like that, I feel also has added to this kind of things. And Nigeria is a deeply religious country. So I feel like, yeah, we really do need to plan for it. And also because the way we build our cities also is that we're building everything in. So all of the major government offices are located within a small, area. So everything is within one city. So everything is cramped, right? So but if we build a lot more, so like in my talk, I spoke about expanding the city outwards, where we're building things more outwards and expanding out than necessarily building in. And I feel this is something you see across many Nigerian cities as well. Yeah.
I was fascinated that when you talked about sea level rise,
Yeah.
you were talking about you've got mangroves, and I guess you could
Yeah.
add more mangroves. Dikes is
Yeah.
another strategy.
Yeah.
Flood, more traditional flood control. But then you're
Yeah.
also talking about architecture and building housing on water. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about that?
Yeah. I mean, this used to be something that so many years ago was a regular thing. You'd find communities, especially because our state's a riverine state, you find
Yeah.
communities that would build their homes to floats, right?
Right.
Where almost every single thing has, like, so they move around with little boats. You have schools, you have them in a certain area, not 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 with the best materials, but like they were able to find a way to make it work. So imagine if we were more deliberate about it, thinking about how we can use the best materials, the best sanitary conditions as well to ensure that these kind of, because I feel like beyond just moving away from the water, at some point the water will meet us. So how do we ensure that we're able to live with it and sort of like adapt to it? And I feel that's what climate adaptation is about. And I feel like that was a challenge to like architecture students to start thinking beyond just the regular way of doing things. Yeah.
And I take it that, like you said, in the past, there were more homes on the water, and then
Yeah.
everybody went terrestrial, more traditional housing.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
it's now your vision, and probably a lot of your the young
Yeah.
forces that you're working with are saying,
Yeah.
let's be creative here. Let's find ways of
Yeah.
bringing that back. Well,
Exactly.
now you have do you have young children, plural, or do you have I know you have at least one
It's
child.
not. I have a son, yes.
A son.
Yeah.
And you talked
Yeah.
about your son in your TED Talk because
Yeah.
you were getting into AI. And,
Mm.
when your son reaches the age
Mm.
where he will be going into the workforce, it'll be very different. How do you
Yeah.
bring together all the factors that you've talked about thus far
Mm.
with AI? How can we prepare? How can you prepare in Nigeria, in Rivers State, for the sort of the brave new world of AI?
Yeah. No, I feel that this is something that we should all really be thinking about, especially just, I think, a couple of weeks ago when the tech platform Block um, announced cuts to jobs, because many of the jobs that they had, I think about 4,000 jobs were cut out because AI could basically do the things that the people that were doing them were doing,
Yeah.
And so, I mean, most of us imagine that this would happen in 10, 15 years, but it's happening now already, right? So I feel like, yeah, more than ever before, like I feel like we need to really be thinking about things like that. And I feel like it calls back to us sort of like trying to understand what truly is work. Like, how do we understand what our purpose is here as human beings? How do we like define what is work that AI can do and what is work that human beings should do, right? And at what point do we sort of understand how those two, let's say, quarters play across each other? For me, I think just ensuring that he has critical thinking skills, because I think that's something that obviously would always forever be important. Creativity is very key as well. emotional intelligence is very, very important because, I mean, machines don't have, if anything we have over AI is emotions, right? Being able to understand something emotionally and react in that way. So having all of this, and I feel like this needs to be something that should be in a school curriculum. It shouldn't be an after-school program. It should be something that should be part of how we design education generally. And I've been part of movements that have pushed for curriculum reform. We've had a bit of victory a couple of years ago where we had the first level reform, but I think that reform needs to be more aggressive now, ensuring that there are different digital skills that we should add to our curriculum. But for those skills to work, we need power, right? Because we need to power the computers as well. We need, so like I feel all the issues are also connected as well. So as we push for change across the board, I feel it has impacts across all of the things that we're working on currently.
And hopefully, I mean, I guess hopefully, you seem very optimistic, which is great. I mean, and hopefully AI can help Nigeria, Rivers State, redefine energy, redefine agriculture, and really move towards sustainable development. Now, we're running out of time. I don't want to leave us on a bummer note, but a lot of this takes money. You laid out about $3 billion of cost that you saw just transforming Rivers State to a sustainable development. Is that where does that come from? Are you looking at multinational development organizations? Are you looking for grants and things like that?
So the fun thing is that money already exists. So what I said in my talk was that money was money that River State had received from something called the 13% derivation fund. And that's the fund so when the money from oil goes out of the country and Nigeria gets a cut of it, a small percentage of that is given back to the states where the oil was gotten from. So that's actually money that we got from 10, 11 years ago that no one can account for, because we've had corruption as a major issue that has eaten into all of those kind of things. So I feel like most of the costs, again, I was calling for citizens to ask themselves, where's that $2 billion? Because I'm like, we need to actually be more active as citizens, asking those hard questions.
So if you could actually tap into those funds that you have and you have had and apply them in towards sustainable development, you'd be in good shape.
Yeah, exactly. And I gave examples from other states as well that have done this.
That have done that. Last question. I don't know how you get all the energy to do everything you've done. You're, in addition to all the credentials that I laid out, the academic, you're a fellow in a half dozen organizations. You have another full-time job, I know. Where do you get all that energy? What are you eating? What are you drinking to charge you up, my friend?
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, I worry a lot about like the kind of future that my son would live in, and I think that's so like drives me to find as much avenues as possible to make the world a better place, no matter how small, no matter how big. Just making sure that every day I'm doing something new that sort of like contributes to it, and I feel like it's been 15 years now of working, and I feel like there's still so much more to do. I mean, we're talking about the climate change issues, and then now there's the conflict in the Middle East and all of the ramifications on the oil industry and all the challenges. So like there's so much happening, and I feel like we really can't just complain about things happening. We need to do something about it. And just like I said earlier, it's not enough to meet in these global conferences and these spaces to just talk. Like we need to move from talking to doing, and I feel like that's what our generation owes ourselves and owes our children as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. As I said before, you're the right guy. Your energy is contagious. I salute your works. Carry on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Same here. Thanks a lot for your time.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's EcoLogic. We'll see you next time.